Hey everyone that just joined, thanks so much. We're gonna give it maybe like 2 minutes or so before we get started. Thanks. Thanks to everyone that just joined. We're just gonna give it 1 more minute before we go ahead and get started. Give everyone another sec to join on. Okay, awesome. Well, thanks so much for being here. I think we can go ahead and get started. So with that, I will turn it over to Michelle just to kick us off, and then we can do a quick round of introductions.
Thank you, everyone. The City of Lafayette is embarking on a safety action plan with the help of Consor and Y2K in cooperation with Superior and Boulder County. I'm Lafayette's city traffic engineer.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Michelle. One more thing before we keep going with introductions. I'm sorry that I forgot about this. I'll let the interpreter kind of take over on the interpretation slide.
Hola, buenos días a todos. Si necesitan escuchar la junta de hoy en español, por favor seleccionen el botón de interpretación en la parte inferior de su pantalla. Ahí podrán escuchar toda la presentación en español en vivo. Muchas gracias y bienvenidos.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much. We'll keep going with our introductions. So my name is Nikki Raymer. I'm with Consor. I'm the project manager on the consultant side. Really excited to be here tonight to kind of give you guys an update about the City of Lafayette VisionZero action plan. So with that, I'll turn it over to Ray.
Hi, everyone. I'm Ray Stefani. I'm with Y2K Engineering. I'm a transportation safety engineer, and our firm is supporting Nikki and her team with this project.
Come on.
Hey everyone, I'm Emma Isley with Consor, and I'm also supporting this project.
Awesome. So goals for the meeting tonight, really kind of first and foremost, we just want to define what VisionZero is. And then ultimately we'll kind of give you a project background, as well as give you an update on the schedule and kind of where we are to date. We've done an initial crash analysis as well, so we'll present that data to you and kind of what we've heard so far. We've already been out in the community a little bit, so just kind of give an update on that. We also are here tonight to collect input from you guys. So this presentation is not meant for us to be talking to you all for the full hour and a half that we've got slotted here. We'll probably be presenting for about 25-ish minutes or so, and then really want to hear from you all and have this be an open discussion and open dialogue. And then lastly, we have an online survey and map as well. So really kind of just want to make sure that if you haven't taken that yet, make sure you have the appropriate links for that and kind of really push that out to you guys so that you can share it with your friends and family and be able to take that survey as well. So just a little bit of background on what is VisionZero. So VisionZero is ultimately a transportation strategy to eliminate all traffic fatalities and serious injuries for people using any mode of travel. So that's people driving in their cars, people walking, people biking, just trying to get from point A to point B. So with that, this map here on the right kind of summarizes all of the agencies and cities that have adopted VisionZero plans, kind of city or nationwide. So you can kind of see a few of them in Colorado, Denver Regional Council of Governments, City of Boulder, and City of Denver. So ultimately, the goal of this VisionZero action plan is to get Lafayette as kind of a point on the map here, and ultimately have an adopted VisionZero action plan. So kind of tied to VisionZero is the safe system approach. So VisionZero is the what, the goal of eliminating serious injury and fatality crashes. Safe system approach is the how. So with that, this concept really understands that we're not going to eliminate all crashes, but really focusing on the ones that are going to result in those serious injuries or fatalities. So we're kind of doing that in a few different ways. The safe system approach acknowledges that humans are going to make mistakes. Mistakes are inevitable. So how can we design the roadway in a way to kind of make those mistakes less severe? So how can we slow vehicle speeds and help, when crashes do occur at a certain angle that typically result in less severe crashes? It also acknowledges that we kind of need to be proactive as well and not reactive. So kind of identifying those locations that might have some safety risks that maybe crashes aren't occurring there now, but they could be in the future, and trying to get ahead of them. And also that responsibility is shared. So transportation safety is everything from a person behind the wheel and driving to someone crossing the road to the engineer designers, the policy makers, as well as like vehicle manufacturers as well. So really kind of that responsibility shared teamwork aspect to transportation safety as well to achieve VisionZero. So with that, a little bit of background specifically about this project. So Boulder County, Lafayette, and the town of Superior have joined forces to complete VisionZero action plans. So in 2023, they applied for a Safe Streets and Roads for All grant, also known as SS4A. And basically those three agencies combined were awarded a planning and demonstration grant for the development of an action plan. So ultimately what we're doing, we're kind of leveraging these three partners together, but ultimately we're going to be developing three separate action plans. So City of Lafayette will be getting a Lafayette specific VisionZero action plan. And then with that, these VisionZero action plans, we're going to create a list of specific actions and kind of safety recommendations and address, how they will be implemented, potential funding sources, items like that as well, based on our safety analysis. So with that, this kind of just visually summarizes kind of the area. So you can kind of see the green outlined area. This is basically the plan that Boulder County geographically will be covered, Superior will have its own, and then Lafayette will have its individual action plan as well. So schedule for the project. Right now we're kind of in this phase 1 of engagement piece. So really right now we're in this listening phase. We want to learn from the communities and kind of understand where you all might be having transportation safety challenges within the city of Lafayette. We're doing that concurrently with a safety analysis as well. So we're going to be taking a deep dive into the crash data. We've kind of got some high level findings so far, and pairing that all with what we hear from you in the community. Once we get through this first phase of outreach, we're basically going to take everything we learned from the technical analysis, from the community outreach, and really use that to start developing projects and developing recommendations and ultimately prioritizing those projects as well. So we'll be kind of working on that towards the fall. And then ultimately, for all of those recommendations, we'll be taking those in some areas kind of one step further, potentially developing some concepts, things like that, as well as developing performance measures, which basically means we'll be identifying ways that kind of, once this plan is done and wrapped up, how can the city of Lafayette measure success, kind of working towards those recommendations over time. And then towards the end of this year, early next year, we'll actually be having draft and final action plans as well. So during that phase, when we have those draft action plans available, we'll actually be coming back to you all presenting what the draft looks like and looking for your feedback as well. So kind of towards the end of this year, be on the lookout for that next round of engagement. And then ultimately, kind of Q2 next year, we'll be wrapping up and looking towards adopting the City of Lafayette's VisionZero action plan through council. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ray to cover some of the preliminary crash data.
Great, thanks, Nikki. So as Nikki mentioned on the previous slide, one of the initial steps of this project was to do a deep dive into the crash data and the crash picture of Lafayette. The data is a really important component to these types of projects because we want to be making data-driven recommendations, not just from where crashes are occurring, but we'll incorporate other data at kind of future steps as well and listen to you all and hear from your perspective where there are additional areas of transportation safety concern. So crash data is just one piece of that data-driven analysis, but it's an important piece to the foundation. So want to just go over some of those key findings with you all today to just kind of set the stage with where we're at right now. So we did consider 10 years of crash data. That takes us through 2022, which is the last year of fully available crash data. And as you can see from this graph, there is a bit of a dip in overall total crashes. It's trending in the right direction, which is fantastic news. But the less fantastic news is that the green metrics on the bottom, those are our serious injury and fatal crashes. And those rates have remained relatively consistent over the years evaluated. So the serious injury and fatal crashes is really where these plans focus, is trying to identify ways to mitigate and prevent those serious injury and fatal crashes from happening. So that's what we'll focus a lot of our efforts on for this plan. Within the 10 years of data, there were 67 serious injury crashes and 19 fatal crashes in Lafayette. So of all of those crashes, the most common types of crashes that were occurring are broadside collisions. There's about 20% of those serious injury fatal crashes that are broadside. And what a broadside crash is when two vehicles collide coming from kind of perpendicular directions, if you will. So think different streets, think T-boning, think running a red light. Those are all broadside collisions. Another prevalent crash type of those severe crashes are approach turn crashes, which might be when vehicles are making a left turn in front of another vehicle going straight, that type of collision at 18%. And then rear end collisions are typically our most common if you consider all crashes, but when you filter by just the severe crashes, rear end crashes are about 16%, followed by side swipe. So those are our most prevalent crash types that we're going to be trying to prevent moving forward. Great. And this is just a quick map of where we're really seeing those crashes occur. Right now, we're working through some more kind of geospatial analysis to create a network map, but this is a heat map that does show kind of the highest concentration of the areas experiencing crashes. So those bright spots really jump out at some of the bigger major intersections, which we would expect because that's where there's a lot of vehicle activity. But we definitely see kind of a dominant trend in crashes on US 287, Baseline, South Boulder Road, and Arapahoe Road, and then again with hotspots at some of those major intersections. So there's kind of two pieces of things we want to glean from this information. One is what types of crashes are happening, and then two is where they're happening, because we can combine those two things to identify strategies to prevent those moving forward.
Awesome. So kind of as Ray mentioned, we're going to kind of have that data-driven technical crash analysis piece, but we're also pairing that kind of with the community outreach as well. So we're collecting input kind of in this first phase a few different ways. One is in-person events. So our project team was at Lafayette Art Night Out last Friday, the 9th, or 2 Fridays ago. So we basically had maps there with some project overview boards, and we're really looking for kind of that location specific feedback from you all. We get a lot of great feedback and kind of comments there. So thank you for all, if any of you stopped by at that event. That was great and it was very well attended. So that was the first way. The second way is kind of through digital outreach. So we have an online survey and map that's available online, which I'll kind of pull up and show you to get there in a second. This looks really similar kind of to that location specific piece that we got from our Lafayette Art Night Out, as well as kind of a high level survey with that takes about 5 minutes. It's got some just transportation specific focused safety questions as well. And then last, the public meeting tonight. So this is kind of another way for us to hear from you all. And we'll kind of have more of a discussion piece towards the end of this meeting. So here is the QR code for the survey and the project link. I can go ahead and drop this link to the project website in the chat. So I will do that right now. But basically, this link that I just dropped in will direct you to the project website page. So you can kind of just see with a quick scroll through, there's kind of these buttons at the top. So this interactive map here, which I'll click on in a second, this will take you to the survey. So this is how you'll access it. But overall, this project webpage just has kind of like project overview, upcoming events, and kind of how to interact with the project team, the latest schedule, as well as kind of just some safety progress to date in each agency. So this will be kind of the landing page for the latest and greatest as we have kind of those next round of engagement opportunities to make sure we'll have them posted on this website. So this will be kind of the main landing page. To access the survey, you'll click this link here. A new web page will pop up. This page is here. It gives directions in Spanish if you need Spanish interpretation, or if you need any other language translation as well. You basically click this button in the top right corner and you can select your language that you need. And this basically everything on this page will be translated. So that's one way, if English is not your first language, that you can kind of still participate in this survey. Specific to the map, you can drop these pins up at the top. You can kind of see, leave your comment. You can give your name if you want to, or your phone number, and then email at a location where you might have a concern, feeling unsafe walking or biking or driving. As you can see, we've got a handful in Lafayette already, which is awesome. This is super helpful to us. So this map is one piece of it. And then the second piece is this survey. So it gives a little bit of a project background and directions kind of on how to drop the pin. But then there's several questions kind of targeted more towards like safety related questions. So with this kind of being that combined partnership between Boulder County, Lafayette, and Superior, you can choose to kind of take the survey targeted just to those agencies and kind of based on where you work by selecting this button here, kind of where you, and you can give it for all of them too, if you're interested in all of them. So you can see just some of them are catered around, where you live, what types of modes that you use. And then just kind of in general, like how you feel like safety wise, driving, walking, taking transit, and biking. So this should take about 5 minutes. Another great data point for us. So that link that I sent will help you get here. So just really encouraging everyone, if you haven't taken this yet, please take it before August 31st. It'll be open through next Saturday. I will have this link and QR code again at the end of the presentation. So if for some reason you missed it or you're missing the chat, we'll have this at the end so you can grab it as well. So just to provide a little bit of context on what we've heard so far. So again, this is what we've heard from the Lafayette Art Night Out, as well as what we've heard on the social pinpoint kind of map survey as well. Again, this is kind of just what it looks like, but we've kind of taken just high level summary of what we heard so far. We know that we're going to hear more within the next 11 days. We know we're going to hear more tonight. So we will add on to this, but this is just what we've heard to date. So with the people that have taken the survey specifically for Lafayette, we've had over 240 people who either kind of take the survey or have the map responses specific to Lafayette. About 65% of the people that took the survey for Lafayette were actually people who lived in Lafayette. So majority of folks are residents of Lafayette. We asked a question basically about what is your primary mode of travel, kind of driving, walking, biking, motor, mobility vehicle. About 85% said they drive. So the vast majority of the folks that took the survey are driving, and then about 15% are kind of taking a combination of those other modes. We also asked the question about how safe do you feel traveling in Lafayette? And we have this question broken down by mode as well. So we've kind of got the summary for driving, for walking, and for biking here. And basically green are people who marked feel very safe, or the two safe options. And then the unsafe one is the combination of feel unsafe or somewhat unsafe. And then this gray color here are people who marked neutral. So you can kind of see for the vehicles, about half of the people who took this question feel safe driving, or about half are kind of on the fence of feeling unsafe or neutral. So it's about kind of a 50-50 split there. For people walking and biking, kind of one thing that was interesting for us, the vast majority of people voted neutral for this. So kind of the piece here, about 30% of people biking feel unsafe. So that's kind of a large percentage, and 20% of people walking feel unsafe. So that's kind of just another data point that we'll look at to kind of make sure that we're improving those modes of travel as well, and kind of just trying to hone in on where people are feeling potentially unsafe while they're walking or biking. And then again, this is just kind of themes that we've heard so far. So this list of themes is definitely going to expand kind of as we get more people taking the survey, and locations of some of these themes are likely going to expand as we take the survey. But again, this is what we've heard to date. We've heard a lot about vehicle speeds, particularly on Baseline Road, Arapahoe Road, and Emma. And then also conflicts between vehicles and pedestrian and bicyclists kind of on those more higher speed roadways. So heard that a lot on US 287 and Baseline Road, kind of that intersection in particular, and then 95th Street and Baseline Road as well. Heard a bit on Baseline Road about poor roadway pavement conditions as well. And then just kind of overall demand and need for bicycle infrastructure. So specifically called out on Baseline Road and South Boulder Road. And then, so now we're going to get into a discussion. So I guess with that, I just want to pause. Our first discussion question is going to be a polling question. So something should pop up on your screen. And we really just kind of want to gauge with you all that are on the call. Does what we presented, does the input that we've heard so far from the engagement to date resonate with you? So kind of yes, no, or partially. And then we'll kind of pause there to kind of discuss, but we've got a few other discussion questions as well that we'll kind of get to after the poll, but just wanted to discuss logistics of how to discuss how to participate, because there are a few ways. So I think one way is to type into the chat. So I'm seeing that some folks are kind of already utilizing that. So please feel free to type in the chat. Just us folks who are kind of hosting the webinar are going to be able to see that. And then you can also submit a question to the question and answer tab as well at the top of your screen. Or you could raise your hand and we can let you come off mute so that you can kind of verbally give. So whatever way you prefer to give your feedback, that would be great. So I think with that, I'm going to have Emma launch the poll. So if everyone can take that, we'll give you a minute or two, and then we'll kind of do the pause for discussion.
And while they're all taking that poll, Nikki, just for your reference, the comment that was dropped in was about those large neutral percentages. And Kendall, I think you made a great point. She indicated that she selected it as neutral because in some places she does feel safe, some places she doesn't. So that neutral might kind of capture the fact that it isn't a blanket answer across Lafayette.
That's great. Thanks, Kendall. It looks like we have 9 people that answered. I think we've got a few more people on the call. Give everyone like 30 more seconds. So far, it looks like we've got about 5 of the 9 people saying, yes, this resonates, and then 4 of the 9 people saying partially.
There are a couple hands up as well. So let's get through results of this first poll and then we can start tackling that feedback if that works for you all.
That sounds great. I feel like we've got the votes we're gonna get. So I think with this, thank you for everyone that is voted. I would love to hear a little bit more about the people who said partially. So I know we've got some hands raised, so potentially if you've got some feedback on kind of why you answered partially, that'd be awesome to hear.
I see Ken's hand is up. What's the best way to give Ken speaking powers?
Ken, you should be able to unmute
Hello,
now.
hello, this is Ken.
Yep, we can hear you.
Very
Can you
Ken.
hear me? Yeah. Okay, yeah, this is thank you for the opportunity. This is Ken Andrews from Wanaka Landing. And first of all, absolutely delighted that you guys are embracing the VisionZero program. So for a couple of points. One is there seems to be a focus on the main corridors, and certainly that is to be expected given that it is that's where the high volume is, that's where the highest speeds are, and so on. And inevitably that's where crashes take place. But certainly what I and fellow neighbors in Wanaka Landing are wanting to represent is that we live in the neighborhood, and that's where we live, it's where the kids play, and so on. And we'd certainly like to make sure we have a focus on actually where people live, not so much the main corridors, but as I say, where people live. But the other factor too is that, and I'll try and keep this brief, is that certainly from a metrics point of view, one needs to focus on crashes and incidents and things like that. But from a street locale point of view, I mean, not all streets are the same. So, for example, in Wanaka Landing, we have Pascal Drive, which has a number of mitigating factors. We have trails crossing, we have sweeping corners, we have 2 crosswalks, we have a number of school bus stops. We have a number of factors which impact what we would say the aggregate or composite risk factors, and they all add up. And in fact, just this evening, I happened to hear of a near miss on a school bus pickup on Pascal Drive. So from a quality point of view, a quality design point of view, we'd certainly like the streets to be assessed from a risk factor point of view based on where the street is, how straight it is or how curved it is, and what other mitigating factors there might be, which would increase the risk of danger to pedestrians, cyclists, and kids, and so on. So I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Nikki, do you want to address that one, or do you want me to tackle it?
Yeah, I can start and then feel free to fill in the gaps. First, thank you so much for your comment. I think that's incredibly helpful. I should say to everyone too, we're transcribing notes as you're giving feedback. So all of your feedback will be documented, listed the neighborhood and kind of some of the streets that you just called out there and some of those near miss kind of risk factors, things that you just called out. So just wanted to let everyone know that and say thank you for those location specific pieces. You're right on with, kind of looking at both where crashes are happening as well as maybe some of the more like looking where the risks are as well, kind of citywide. So I know the next piece of this project will be developing a high injury network. So that's basically kind of like looking where the crashes, the severe injury crashes and fatalities are occurring, but we'll also be looking at what's called a high risk network and looking at some of those factors, exactly what you said. So like where there's crosswalks, what are the speed limits, what are potentially some volumes on roadways and how that kind of overlaps with crashes and what those trends are. So kind of, yeah, exactly what you described are certainly things that we're going to be looking at and making sure that Lafayette has several state highways that go through the city, but also making sure that we're looking at the local roadways as, the city-owned roadways as well, in our analysis. Anything else to add, Ray, or I have
No,
another?
I think you covered it. Just that we echo your concerns. I think there's a great problem to have and that there aren't a ton of severe crash data points. So we don't want that to be the only thing we base our recommendations on. So we are certainly considering those risk factors. And as Nikki described, that is a next step to this analysis and something we should be able to share more on during the next community touch point. Just looking at hands that are up, Ken, unless you have anything else, Janet, you see your hand up if you want to come off mute.
Okay, this is Janet. Thank you for this meeting. I appreciate it. One of my questions is, you have the information for the types of accidents, but do you have the information for what caused the accident?
That's a great question. And the short answer is yes. We have a lot of data for each of those points. So we're trying to share with you all kind of a succinct piece of that. And so what we do know for each crash are the factors that led up to that. We know what direction vehicles are coming. We know what time of day it is. We know where it happened. We know whether or not that crash was flagged as involving speeding or an impaired driver. So we do know a lot of that information on a crash by crash basis, and we can glean and are gleaning trends from that information as well beyond just the type of the crash.
Okay.
Yes, and we can get more into that or follow up with more information if you're interested.
I am interested because I live between Baseline and Arapahoe, just off of 287, that Diamond Circle intersection. And unless there's no way else other than to go through that intersection, I avoid it because there's so many times that people are running red lights. And it's not just a yellow light. There are sometimes 4 cars that go through when our side is already green. So I just wonder if there's some activity before you finish the study to look at the number of people that run red lights, because I'm sure that's one of the contributors to the accidents.
Yes, that's absolutely a contributor to accidents. And we can dive into that intersection more specifically in our analysis with your feedback. But those types of considerations, like which direction people are coming from, and whether or not there was a traffic violation, that's all part of the information we have and are assessing.
Okay, and it's not just that intersection, but it's also South Boulder Road and 287. Those are the 2 ones that I frequent the most and see cars running through the red lights.
Yeah, that's great feedback. Thank you. And for those high crash frequency locations, like kind of everything that jumped up in as a hotspot on that map, we
Yeah.
do anticipate doing more of that deeper dive to evaluate trends at those intersections.
So later on, will we get information on what the conclusion is from these studies and what the plan is?
Nikki or Michelle, you might be better poised to answer. I don't want to overshare what our deliverable plans are.
Yeah. So I can start, Michelle, feel free to tag on. So totally all of this analysis will be part of the final action plan and final report. And then kind of toward the end of the year, we'll be back with kind of what we heard from phase one, a little bit more detail of what we heard from the crash analysis and saw from the crash analysis, along with like draft recommendations as well. And we'll be looking for public input and feedback on those. So it'll be like end of the year where we're probably back to the public kind of presenting that and asking those questions
Okay.
for your input.
And that'll include specific things that are being done.
So we're not going to be able to cover every single location citywide. So we're going to focus on kind of more of those crash hotspots. So some of the intersections on 287, for example, there was a study wrapped up there end of last year. So anything specific to 287, I can send you the link to that plan as well. That could be a good starting point for 287 pieces. Citywide, other crash hotspots, you know, we'll be taking a look at in more detail, but just kind of given the scale of the project, you know, if there's a location that may only have 3 crashes and there weren't like a serious injury or fatality, we're probably not going to be doing a deep dive there, focusing the resources kind of more where planning hasn't already occurred, and those more like critical locations.
Okay.
I can send you that. I can send the link in the chat for the 287 report, just so that you've got reference to it in case you haven't seen it.
I haven't.
Okay, I will send the website link.
Thank you.
Yep. Michelle, anything else you want to add to that?
I was just going to sort of highlight that study had a lot of focus on the Lafayette section, including a concept plan for the area between Baseline and Arapahoe. And Janet, we're also starting a project with CDOT to put transit for sort of a transit station at the Lucerne intersection. So that might be of interest for you as well.
Okay, thank you.
And one more plug, we're obviously taking notes here and we'll be, you know, documenting that for our study, but also it sounds like you have a couple location specific concern areas that I would really encourage you to use that link that Nikki put in the chat to go to the map and drop those so that it kind of gets added to the like public input on that map as well. Again, we're documenting notes and that'll all be reflected there, but that's a good place to land any other concerns that you might have.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks for the feedback. I just sent that link in there. If you have trouble accessing it, just feel free to either raise your hand again or message back.
Okay, I think I got it.
Cool, thanks.
Great. And I don't see other hands up. We have gotten some additional activity in the chat. A lot of good feedback from Kendall. Thank you.
Ron's hand keeps going up. Can we give him?
Oh yeah, I must keep missing it. Go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Hi, thank you. This is Ron Spalding, City of Lafayette resident, live in Coal Creek Village. This is really great, tremendous. And the input I've heard so far resonates with me. I just had 2 questions for clarification. The old days, we used to call them accidents. Now the transportation industry calls them crashes. So my one question is, what's the difference between accidents and crashes? And the second point of clarification is in a serious injury, what is the definition of a serious injury? Is it one where you go to hospital? So that's just 2 points of clarification I have.
both good questions, and happy to clarify. Nikki and Michelle, chime in if you feel more explanation is needed. Generally, as an industry, we've shifted away from the word accidents and shifted to the word crash, just with the understanding that when there's a collision on the roadway, it's typically not a complete accident. There's typically some factor that could have been prevented, or there's some factor involved that could have been prevented to prevent that crash from happening. So I guess it's a semantics thing, but I think as an industry, we've just started using the word crash as opposed to the word accident to try to make a little bit more accountability on driver behavior. And then on the infrastructure design side as well, just acknowledging that a crash is a crash and it's not an accident. There's something that we can do to try to prevent those moving forward.
Okay.
To answer the second part of your question, a serious injury crash is more longly defined as a serious bodily injury crash. And I believe the technical definition is that it is if it's a life-threatening injury. So typically that's something that's a little bit more extreme. Maybe that driver or pedestrian, bicyclist, whoever was involved in that had to leave the scene in an ambulance. But something that's more in the life-threatening caliber, as opposed to another classification is a minor injury crash. Right. And those might be more kind of bumps and bruises as opposed to life-threatening, life-altering.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah, good questions. Thank you.
I think there's a slight clarification too. I think it's any inhibiting injury. So if you came on a bike and you cannot leave on the bike, even if you're not wheeled away to the hospital, it's incapacitating, I think is the word. So in addition to what Ray said, that would also be a severe injury.
Thanks, Michelle. Ken, I see you've got your hand raised again.
Yeah, sorry, just one process question. I have talked to some residents in Wanaka Landing who classify themselves as not tech savvy, and the survey scares them. Are there other ways that they can input their thoughts?
Sorry, I missed the piece about the survey. They're having trouble accessing it, or
Well, I spoke to one resident recently, and he can access it, but he can't do it. And he said, "Look, I'm not tech savvy. I don't know how to
got
do
it.
this." Are there other ways for people to input their thoughts?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So, I think one way we're capturing feedback tonight, we captured feedback at the in-person event as well. If they're comfortable using email, on that project website, there is a, here, let me go back to it. There is a VisionZero email that is set up.
Got it. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, right here.
Okay.
So this would be another way to provide input as well. We're encouraging people to use the survey just so that all the data comes in
Sure.
in one way. But if there is something kind of miscellaneous that they're just having trouble with, please, we'd rather have the input come in some way. Just have them specify like location, and that is kind of targeted more to Lafayette. That would be gratefully helpful to us when we're post-processing it. But that email is set up.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep. Question. Looks like some more people have hands raised, but I can't see who on my end. So I'll look to Emma and Ray to to tell me.
Yeah, Deborah,
Great.
you're next.
Hi. I appreciate what's been done with this to allow people to give input and to see that that input has been received. You know, they can still find it on the map. In the past, when I've had concerns about dangerous places in Lafayette, I haven't always been sure that I was reporting them to the right authority because I never heard back. oh yes, we're on it, or you need to report this somewhere else, or whatever. So I'm wondering if there's any plan to keep that map accessible and or to provide some sort of response saying, this has been forwarded to the appropriate authority, or you know, we understand, but it's a low priority and it might not get fixed, or just some sort of response that so people can feel like they're not just shouting into a void.
Yeah, so I think if it's, I guess first and foremost, we'll be taking all that data and making sure all the Lafayette specific stuff gets to Michelle, kind of all the Boulder County gets the right people and vice versa. I would recommend if it's like a maintenance issue or something that's like really critical like that, this survey probably isn't the best place for that. This is more of like, hey, where do you feel unsafe walking or biking? If it's like a stop sign down or this traffic signal light is out, I'll turn it over to Michelle kind of on the best way to potentially give that feedback to the city directly. So we're going to do our best to make sure everything gets handled and passed over, but anything like immediate safety wise would be best just to go directly to the city platforms just so that it can be addressed as soon as possible. So Michelle, I don't know if you have some background on best process for that.
There is a Public Works main line number that I can provide for anything like a signal operation issue or a stop sign missing or blocked or anything like that. We get a lot of neighborhood speeding requests. So if it's in the vein of that, we have over 40 locations that we're monitoring, that we're getting speed data on this fall. So especially things where roadways were designed probably in earlier times that were primarily for vehicle throughput, things like that will probably be a longer lead item. And we have some avenues for that we tracked through our multimodal transportation plan. So if you're not on that list, that would be a good thing for me to know. But I think the biggest thing is for these longer lead items, the intent of this project is to start tracking those and come up with programmatic ways to address those. I don't know let me know if did I answer your question, Deborah?
Well, if you were going to provide a mode of contact, that would be great. Also, I've in the past contacted Lafayette and they've said, "Oh, that's on Baseline. That's a state highway. You need to contact the State Department of Transportation." So, if there are two or more different places, this would also be great to know. Thank you.
Yeah, I can provide the CDOT contact us website too. There are a lot of state highways in Lafayette. And we do typically, if we get anything from there, we forward it on to CDOT or with your permission, we'll input your information in so that they contact you back. Nikki, I can't type out to everyone, I don't think, so I'll throw the information to you.
Okay, and I can copy it to everyone. That sounds good.
And I still see Ron's hand up. I don't know if that's a holdover, Ron, or if you have additional feedback. Kendall, maybe while we're waiting, see if Ron has more feedback, Kendall can chime in.
Yeah, hi. I was just curious. I had a question if and I came in a little late to the call, so you might have said this already, but the crash data that was presented, was that numbers just from two vehicle crashes, vehicle crashes, or does that include crashes that happen between a car and a pedestrian or a car and a cyclist?
Good question. That includes all reported crashes. So that would be vehicle to vehicle, vehicle to pedestrian, vehicle to bicycle.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Janet?
Since 287 is a state highway, is CDOT responsible for people running red lights through those intersections?
Yeah, so basically all the maintenance and operations on 287 is typically CDOT in partnership with Lafayette, but Michelle, looks like you can go.
Yeah, Lafayette PD do a fair amount of enforcement on 287 as well. So we have gone through the safety or the 287 safety plan, and they are trying to run targeted enforcement on the top intersections, which are Baseline, Arapahoe, Dillon, and Northwest Parkway. So they're doing targeted enforcement at those locations because those had the most correctable collisions.
Okay.
But CDOT would be the ultimate authority for any structural or signal or any physical changes.
But it would be Lafayette Police in addition to state traffic control?
Yes, in addition to State Patrol. So
State Patrol.
State
Okay.
Patrol in that region doesn't have too many people, but Lafayette PD and State Patrol do coordinate.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Ron, just one more opportunity. See if you had additional feedback.
Yes, I just have one, speaking up from Kendall's point on the chart on the crash data 2013, 2022. And I didn't have a chance to look at the 287 study, but I'm assuming or presuming that includes, or CDOT has a list of the high accident intersections and or high accident sections along 287, which is incorporated in that.
Yeah, that's correct. So CDOT was key stakeholder throughout the project, throughout the
Right.
process. They were on the project management team, and if
Gotcha.
kind of bought off on all the recommendations and kind of planning level analysis that was done.
Gotcha. And in the 2013, 2022 crash data, it really dropped off in 2020. And I assume that's when COVID kicked in and everybody was staying home, right?
Yeah, that's something we've seen pretty consistently across the board,
Right.
both in Lafayette and other jurisdictions as well.
Sure.
A lot of times what we see is that total crash number comes down like drastically because there's just less people on the roadway. But what's interesting is that typically the severe crashes, they maybe come down a little bit, but not quite as much.
Gotcha.
So also with the emergence of COVID, just, speaking in more general transportation safety trends, something we've seen is that that severe crash trend did not drop as far. It's because there was less drivers on the roadway, presumably going faster, presumably with less kind of social civic responsibility for driving. There's been some really interesting studies around that. So short answer is yes, that drop off is likely due to COVID. And then the longer answer is there's some philosophy discussions about why that hasn't impacted other trends.
Right. And that's a good plug for live near your work. Anyway, thank you very much.
Yep.
Thank you. Okay.
Anthony, I think you're up next. And Anthony, I saw you came off mute, but if you're talking, we're not able to hear you.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Great. Good evening, everybody. My name is Tony Meneghetti. I work for CDOT. I'm an engineer, and I'm also a resident of Lafayette. So I'm attending this meeting, as part of my job, but also because, I'm interested in the effort here. Just a couple comments that came to mind. I know that there's some frustration with running red lights, and what I see in a majority of accidents, it's, causes are almost always either excessive speed or distracted driving. Two things that are on the rise, and they're really difficult to have an effect on, from CDOT's perspective. CDOT does maintenance of the roadways, and we also design and build them. but we don't have any means of enforcement. So traffic enforcement is done by the Colorado State Patrol, and as Michelle said, also the city of Lafayette. So there is some partnership there. Colorado State Patrol would enforce speed and that type of thing on the state highways that are within the town of Lafayette, like Baseline, Arapahoe on the west side of 287, 287 through town, Highway 42 on the south side of town. But then on the smaller roads, that is going to be the Lafayette Police Department that does enforcement there. I guess one curiosity that I had was in the survey, and the high number of 63% of peds and bikes were neutral. I'm just curious as to where that's coming from. I mean, is that because a high percentage of people don't travel, don't get around by walking or riding, or is it more of those people that do walk or ride are kind of neutral? Because I think there's kind of a lot of you kind of put your safety in other people's hands, right? If you're riding your bike on the side of the road, you don't have much control over whether or not somebody isn't paying attention, and they run their car into you. So I guess that was just my thought when I saw those numbers. And that's all I've got.
Yeah, thanks, Tony. I appreciate that. For the neutral piece, one person did kind of comment in the chat that she answered it as neutral because sometimes she feels safe, sometimes she doesn't. It's kind of location specific. So we acknowledge that question is kind of set up in a way that's very general, and maybe people feel really safe, walking around their neighborhood, but not so much, maybe crossing 287. So that's potentially one reason why it's neutral. If anyone else on the call kind of remembers answering that neutral and has some thoughts, feel free to kind of drop that in the chat as well.
I'll also just jump in really quickly and say that there was an option on that question to pick, I do not use this mode. So we're assuming that the people that answer neutral do walk as a mode of transportation. But like the person in the chat answer, potentially feel unsafe in some areas and unsafe in some areas and safe in others. And we'll also kind of, as we're post-processing this survey data, the survey is still open, so we're still accepting responses. But when we do that kind of deep dive into all the responses that we did get, we will be able to kind of cross-tab with what people chose as their primary form of transportation and their answers to other questions to hopefully gain some insights as to why that neutral answer may be. So kind of more to come on that.
Thanks, Tony.
Yeah, thanks for being here, Tony.
And Ken, I think you're next.
Yeah, apologies. I don't want to dominate the input here, but on the 287 question, so the state highways run through our city, Lafayette. Is there any plans to do what Boulder has done? Boulder has a series of red light cameras on main intersections, and they charge $75 a pop if you get it wrong. I won't concede whether I know this from personal experience, but the money apparently goes to Boulder Safety Fund. Are there any plans to do that, and can we do that to pay for some of these safety improvements in Lafayette? And second question is Complete Streets policy has many provisions, many preventative provisions, and so on. Will this VSAP program be the driver for adopting Complete Streets, or is that a separate thing? And what's the anticipated timeline for that? Thank you.
Do you want me to tackle those, Nikki?
Yeah, maybe if you want to start, I'm glad to help fill in the blanks. I think you'll have the best handle.
Currently, Lafayette PD or Boulder County would be the ones that would have to, and Tony, please correct me if this is incorrect to your knowledge, would be the ones to put up either red light running cameras, or there's been some recent legislation around speed radar enforcement as well. The county is picking up that, but currently Lafayette PD are not, do not have the resources to pick that up. There have been discussions about it, and I think it's one of the things that we would like to consider, but that, and along with a complete streets policy, that was not part of this scope. There would likely be policy recommendations that come out of this scope, and we do have the complete streets policy on our radar. We're also updating our standards and transportation standards and specifications as a city right now. So we're hopefully moving in that direction, but we wouldn't have a full complete streets policy probably for a few years, and that would be through the planning department. So that would be in collaboration with the planning department. Did I answer all your questions, Ken?
Sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes and no, Michelle, and we've talked directly about this, but it's just there's to me maybe I see it too simplistically, but there's a way to sort of have our cake and eat it too. If we can get additional revenue from red light cameras, that would be great to channel that into improve safety within Lafayette. And secondly, complete streets. Well, actually, let me turn it around into a question. What can we do as residents to help accelerate the adoption of complete streets?
Get us more staff or more revenue.
Right. So 50 red light cameras, we'll have that in 6 months. How's that?
But like I said, the last time that I've talked to Lafayette PD, they are not interested in taking that on.
Okay. Final comment, and I keep saying that, I apologize, but again, from a resident's point of view, we feel in our neighborhoods, many of us feel that we're sort of behind on sort of basic neighborhood street marking, signs, although, we've just got some additional signs, and thank you for that. And we would really like the city to sort of look at the overall budget and say, well, okay, you're spending a lot of money on smart city stuff and things like that. How about doing some basic catch up on street safety? I don't particularly personally care about smart cities and all that. I'd much rather have my neighbors and my neighbors' kids and so on feel safe in the neighborhood. So again, that's a broader question. How can we influence the budget allocation to put a greater emphasis on street safety?
I mean, the upcoming budget process is, I think, final adoption in October for the 2025 budget. I don't know of any smart city stuff that we're pursuing right now. It is everything that we've been pursuing from the multimodal transportation plan is sort of basic, figuring out what our assets are and how to better maintain them, and basic safety things like stop sign retroreflectivity, signal pole analysis. But that budget process is open in October.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I see Kendall, I saw you posted in the chat, but it looks like you had your hand up as well.
Yeah, I was just gonna speak to Tony's question about the neutral. I was the person who answered that. I answered neutral because there are some places I feel very safe as a pedestrian and a cyclist, and some places I don't. In particular, in our neighborhood, echoing Ken's concerns in his neighborhood, we have a through street in our neighborhood, Casper Drive, that Michelle's very aware of our concerns about it. And in the past, we've been told that there are no safety things that can be done to fix the problem. I do not feel safe. My children aren't safe. My neighbors aren't safe crossing that street because of speeding cars through our neighborhood. But one street over on Jackson, which is not a thoroughfare, it's very safe. It feels very safe. So I think that's where you're not seeing that granularity in the survey responses, but hopefully you will see them on the map responses. I did, and I know my neighbors have put in several responses to that map to indicate the problem areas. I'm very excited to see this that Lafayette has a VisionZero action plan, because I think it does have components that will address the pedestrian safety issues in our neighborhood streets. And again, just want to sort of back up what Ken's saying, that most of us are aware that 287 is a high-speed corridor and it's a busy place with lots of busy intersections in Lafayette, but a lot of us spend a lot of time in our neighborhoods, and our kids playing in our neighborhoods and in the streets in our neighborhoods. And that's where I think a lot of our concerns are. So we would like to see, efforts going not just to those busy intersection problem areas, but also to our neighborhood streets and our residential streets that could use, like Ken said, more signage, more stop signs, more lower speed limits, all of the traffic calming things that might be included in this plan. And thanks so much for having this meeting.
Thanks, Kendall. Can I ask one follow-up question on the Casper Drive piece, just to make sure we get it right? When you say
Sure,
feeling unsafe, is that like speeding, number of vehicles? Is it unsafe while driving, walking, crossing the street, bike?
yes.
Kind of what are you...
All of the above. So Casper Drive has become a cut through. It has roundabouts that were supposed to calm traffic, but they're not designed well. The streets are too wide, so cars can easily speed through the middle of our neighborhood, basically. There have been a lot of near misses with pedestrians along that street. There have also been, including my son, there have also been there have been pets that have been killed on that street because of speeding cars. There have been parked cars that have been hit by speeding cars. So a lot of, and I don't know if those things end up being reported and end up being in your data, but yeah, it's all of those problems. I think speed is a major factor, but also distracted driving is probably also at play there too.
Okay, awesome. Thanks so much.
Yeah.
The last hand up is Tony. Tony, did you have an additional comment?
Yeah, I was just going to follow up on the comment about red light cameras in Lafayette. I'm not familiar with what CDOT's policy is at this moment as far as installing red light cameras on state highways. I work in Boulder, so I know that, those red light cameras that they have, I know I see them go off all the time. So, but I just don't know what the cost is of, for one, installing those, two, processing all those pictures and processing the actual tickets, and then the man hours that it takes to send people out, after people that don't pay the ticket, right? Because I've heard of people that don't pay it, and then Boulder actually sends a Boulder PD officer out to people's houses and lets them know, hey, you have to pay this. So I think Boulder might have the resources to do that. It might be a little bit more difficult for a smaller town like Lafayette to do that. But I can look into what CDOT's policies are at this point for red light cameras, and whether we do install them on state highways. There might be some way to work together with Lafayette in order to try to start implementing some of this technology. It's just that initial startup cost can be hard because the equipment is really expensive to buy. And then, there's the processing, and yeah, it does raise some revenue, but I don't know if it would be like a net positive revenue generator. But I can follow up. I'll follow up with you, Michelle.
Awesome. Thanks, Tony.
Yep.
And that's it for hands, Nikki.
Okay, that sounds good. I think in the interest of time, I feel like we've got a lot of great feedback kind of on like general questions, general comments, specific areas of concern. So I just want to make sure we hit on kind of this last question. What would a safe street look like to you? So that could mean different things to different people. So I know just to kind of kick us off, we did have one person, Kendall posted in the chat. So she had kind of said, a safe residential street looks like one that's 20 miles per hour speed limit, has other traffic calming measures if needed, plenty of well-marked crosswalks, wide sidewalks, and or bike lanes. So kind of just wanted to open up to the group, like if you could envision a safe street, yeah, what would that look like to you? And that could be, more residential, or it could also be think your larger arterials, your busier roads, your state highways, kind of how would those look safer as well, in addition to those residential streets?
All right, should we just go in order on hands?
That's perfect. Let's do
Great.
that.
All right, Ken, you're up.
Okay, back again. That's a great question. I think in terms of the terminology of the multimodal transportation plan, in the neighborhoods, which, Kendall and I have been talking about, where you have a neighborhood connector, and in our case, in Wanaka Landing, the streets are wide, they're curvy, they're up and down, and so on. Certainly, we'd like to see bike lanes. Ideally, on the crosswalks, the two crosswalks on Pascal Drive, we would like to see raised crosswalks. And I know there's a concern about snow removal, but I have seen locations around the US where they have raised crosswalks that are compatible with snow removal. So I certainly like to see that. And then where a specific concern for us in Wanaka Landing is with the addition of the pickleball courts in Wanaka Lake. There is additional traffic coming through our neighborhood connectors, which involves people coming to play in seemingly the best pickleball courts around, who are not familiar with our neighborhood, and they're coming through the neighborhood connectors, and sometimes they miss the neighborhood connectors and then go through some of the more residential streets as they try and get back on course. So really the traffic calming provisions of complete streets is what we would like to see. And I'd certainly like to point out the possibility of raised crosswalks. Thank you.
Thanks, Ken.
And Ron, you had your hand up when we kind of first kicked this off. Did you want to weigh in?
Yeah, I agree with both Ken and Ken. Oh yeah, two Kens, Ken and Kendall. Okay. I agree with what they said, the local street. It all depends on the street. You got the federal functional classification of highways, and you know better than I do, the principal arterials, major collectors, and then local streets. They each have certain criteria. And I don't want to go into detail of all that because you know better than I do. But for the local, I agree with what they said. Take a look at what the city's doing on South Boulder Road, which, the current construction project, I don't know what that's classified as, probably a arterial. And that type of street, I think they're doing everything the right way. I mean, we're getting the correct width right away for the number of lanes, wide sidewalk on both sides for pedestrian bike on the south side. I don't know, 10-foot sidewalk or whatever, great for pedestrians and all. We got a raised median barrier. So we have the hiker biker trail on the north side. We have that. I think it goes into complete streets. You're having your intersections, safety with the ADA proper and all that. So I'll just say, what do they call it? Best practices for each functional class is what the citizens want. And that's my comments. Thank you.
Awesome.
Thanks, Ron.
Thanks, Ron.
All right, I don't see any other hands up, Nikki.
Okay. Kind of with that, any just last minute questions, comments that we might not have discussed so far? Give everyone like another minute or so to raise their hand or drop it in the chat. If not, I can go ahead and wrap us up. Okay. Well, not hearing anything, I'll keep going, kind of go through next steps. But just want to say thank you so much for all of your comments, your questions. This discussion has been great. I know I've personally have learned a lot and just really value all your time being here and providing your input. So thank you. So with that, just to wrap us up on next steps. So we're going to be continuing on kind of that crash analysis and more technical analysis piece. And we're going to use the crash analysis kind of paired with a community input. So again, online survey, what we learned at Art Night Out, what we're learning tonight, any of those kind of emails that are trickling in from residents over the next few weeks. We're going to pair those two together to ultimately kind of paint a picture of what we learned and draft some recommendations and kind of come up with a prioritized project list as well. So those recommendations are going to include a mix of both kind of the engineering and non-engineering. So things like enforcement, kind of education. It'll be kind of that complete toolbox of recommendations that we'll come up with. Once we do that, we are going to develop the actual draft of the Lafayette VisionZero action plan and ultimately bring that plan and those draft recommendations to you all as the public and community so that you guys can provide feedback on those draft recommendations. So making sure we're not missing anything. If you've got questions about some of the crash analysis and crash data, that'll be the time for us to kind of address those and kind of hear from you. So with that, again, the online survey is open through August 31st. The QR code and website link is here. Feel free to also on the website, you can sign up for project updates. So we won't be bombarding your emails, but kind of at those key touch points, we'll be pushing out information through those kind of website updates and keeping the project website up to date as well with kind of the latest and greatest. And then kind of expect early winter as that next checkpoint with you guys for those draft recommendations as well. So with that, again, just want to say thank you so much. I really appreciate you guys being here. I know us as a project team really appreciates it. Learned a lot of great information. Really value your time. So with that, we can go ahead and wrap up the meeting. And the project website is up here, and then Maya and Michelle's contact information is up here as well if you need to reach either of us. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.